Today's training is going to cover one main aspect of Chronicle, and that is custom reports. Now, to start off with those custom reports, let's take just a minute and do a quick refresher of the standard reports so that we can kind of move into the custom reports to make it a little bit easier for you to understand. Now, I will preface today's training with this. Custom reports are probably the most complicated aspect of Chronicle, and it's not because they're hard to do. The reason it's complicated is because there's so much that you can do with it, right? So before we do anything, I always want to start off by saying this. If you are trying to run a report or create a report, the best thing you can do is go into running that report or creating that report with a knowledge or an idea already of what you want to see. Because if you go in there kind of blindly, well, let's see what there is to offer, you know, that can be, obviously you can do that. That's perfectly fine. But keep in mind, it might get a little overwhelming for you. So my recommendation is to, before you run a report, before you create a report, think about what kind of report do I want to see? What kind of information do I want found on that report? Because at that point, it will help me to determine more quickly what it is that I should be doing with the reports. Okay. So to access our reports, really simple. Come up here to where it says reports, and you're going to get a drop down. Now, one of the questions before I actually jump into our standard reports, one of the questions I used to get a lot on this training is, how do I know if I have the custom reports module? If you're not sure if you have custom reports, there's a really easy way to tell. If you see if you see create report right here, create report is a sure sign that you have custom reports. If you do not see create report, then unfortunately you do not have the custom reports module. Okay, so if you're on here today and you're thinking, oh, I don't have that, do I have to stick around? No, if you don't want to stick around, if you don't have it, then that's perfectly fine. I take no personal offense to that. Okay, little side note. There you go. Okay, let's access our standard reports. To do that, I just click on this tab that says Run Report. You can do that here, or you can also do that right here. There's a tab that says Run Report. So you can click on either one of those, and that will take you to the list of our standard reports. Now, standard reports themselves can be fairly overwhelming because we have over 50 reports that you'll have access to. Now, I do like to stress with custom reports, guys, that custom reports does not provide you extra reports, but it does allow you to do three things. The first thing that you can do with custom reports is, of course, create your own report. So if you're going through here thinking, man, there's a report that I'm looking for, but I don't see, you know, if you can't find that report, then you can create it from the ground up. That's perfectly fine. The other option that you have is you also have the option to edit any of the existing reports. Okay, so editing a report gives you the ability to take the existing report, but make changes to it so it reflects your definitions or it reflects your values, what data you want to see. Okay, so we're going to start in just a minute here with creating a report. But before we do that, let's talk about how to run a report and how to select a report and that kind of stuff. And I will quickly mention the third thing that you can do with custom reports is you can create your report skin. We're not going to focus too much on that today. Report skin is basically meaning you can add your logo to the report and you can change the colors to your report and things like that. I'll address that just really quickly, but we're not going to spend our time too much on that one today because the more important aspect of this is how do I get the data that I'm looking for. Okay. So when I'm running a report, really simple. First thing you have to do is select the report that you want to run. Now, as you select a report here in this list of reports, what you're going to see to the right-hand side is you're going to see kind of a preview or a sample of what that report might look like. Now, the purpose of this really is to show you the column headers of those reports. The column headers are accurate, and they are going to show you what this report is going to report on. But you need to be careful with these report previews just a little bit, and here's why. Here's another report. This is another popular report. We'll talk about this in just a minute here, but this one's called the Agent Call Summary. It's going to show you me a list of all of the users that I selected to see, and then statistics based upon what kind of involvement they've had with the calls. Right. So this is a popular report because it allows me to see for each user how many calls have they been involved with, inbound, outbound, internal, even up to the point where we can see, hey, how many of those inbound calls have they answered and how many have they missed? Right? So this is a very popular report. But if I start looking at this, great, I can see the column headers and that's what I should be focusing on. But if I start looking at these numbers, right, Aaron Clark, first of all, I have no idea who he is. And if you do have an Aaron Clark in your company, that's a complete fluke. Okay, because I'm going to start looking at this. Inbound calls 147, outbound calls 22, internal 101, total calls 18. Clearly, that is not accurate. This is just filler information. Okay. Once I run the report, then that will be accurate. It will give me the actual totals. But right now, what we want you to focus on is the column headers. Okay. And then the rest of this is just filler information again until I run the report. We did that because simply it would look weird if we left all of this blank. Okay. So look at the column headers. When you click on those reports, that will help you choose which reports you want to run. Okay. Now with that, how do I run this report? Well, really simple. Every report will have down here in the bottom right-hand corner what we call, or what we refer to as, the report runner window. The report runner window contains questions that I need to answer in order to be able to run the report. Now, today, for today's sake, we're going to create a report in just a little bit that I create because I want to show you some advanced features with this. These are what we refer to as parameters for today's sake. Okay, so those questions, if I say the word parameters, I'm referring to the questions here in my report runner window. Okay. So for this report here, it wants to know 3 things that I have to answer. Number 1, it wants to know, what report time frame do I want to see? My report time frame is basically the time frame that I want to see featured on that report, or the time frame that I want it to look at for this report. So really simple. I open this up, a little calendar is going to pop up, and it's going to say, okay, what time frame do you want to see? Now, the great thing about this is I can go back from the point that Chronicle was installed up until the present point in time. So if I have had this installed for 3 years, can I go back and run a report from 3 years ago? Absolutely. Okay. Keep that in mind. I'm not going to run one from 3 years ago today because my demo doesn't go back that far, but we're going to go back here and we're going to select a time frame. But you can go back from any amount of time, again, as long as it's a time when Chronicle is installed. That rule applies to the custom reports as well. When I create a report, guys, I run that report the same way that I would any standard report. It's going to appear here in my list that I can choose from. It's going to have parameters that I'm going to answer, and then from there, it's the same thing. Okay, but we'll get to that in just a minute. For now, to run this report, I can do a day, I can do the entire week. All I have to do to select multiple days is select the first day of that time frame and then the last day of that time frame, and it highlights everything in between. Okay, I can be more specific. I've got this advanced button here that allows me to change certain things like the times. By default, Chronicle looks at 24 hours a day. Maybe I don't want it to look at 24 hours. Maybe I just want it to look at my business hours, which typically for most of our clients is like 8 to 5. But of course, you can change that to reflect whatever your business hours are. Or maybe I just want to see something like 8 to 10 a.m. I would just adjust that to say 8 to 10, and therefore I now have the ability to see just those 2 hours of the day. Okay, so you have a little bit more flexibility with these advanced calendar properties. I'm not going to focus on those today. Let's go and actually run this report for the 26th through the 30th. We'll hit OK. This is an agent report. Okay, agent reports are referring to your users, if you'd rather call them users, or sometimes people call them extensions. Okay, but if you ever see the word agent, this is my users. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this for agents. So it wants to know, okay, well, on this report, which agents do you want featured? So I'll open this up, and it's going to give me essentially 3 options. Now, again, if you have been on my training session recently, you know what these are. You have the option to do this by individual users. Okay, if I wanted to select my individual users, I can. Or I can also use this select all option, drop this down. Maybe I want to see the entire group. So it's going to show me all users from that group, right? Or I can create a Chronicle role. A Chronicle role is essentially a Chronicle created group that is separate from my phone system groups. My phone system groups I cannot change within Chronicle. However, I can create a Chronicle role, which is essentially a list of users that I've assigned to a team. So I call this team Marketing Team 1 or Marketing 1, and it's going to feature like 10 or 11 different users that I've assigned to that team. Tune in for on my Tuesday training if you want to know how to do that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and select that role, and then I've got this charts option. Charts are basically just graphs. Hey, what information do you want to see in a visual representation, based upon a line chart, pie chart, or bar chart? And I can adjust these however I want to, right? Maybe I want those 2 together. Maybe I want this one to be a little bit bigger. Okay, so you can do that if you'd like. Okay, so those are the 3 questions that I have to answer. Now from there, I can jump down here where it says PDF. PDF gives me, I actually have different formats that I can use for this report or that I can run this report in. So I have PDF, Excel spreadsheet, HTML, or comma separated value. We'll go ahead and leave it with PDF, and then we just hit run report. That's it. That's how I run a report. So answer those few questions. Obviously, that took me it took a long time because I explained each portion of it. But on a typical day, when you go to run that report, that takes a whole of 10 seconds to set up, right? And there you go. You get your report. It's nice, clean, easy to read, easy to understand. And then, of course, you get your charts down here that will show me, again, the desired visual representation of those column headers, right? So missed calls shows we have one missed call, Mario Kelly. I can come up here to my report again. There's my missed calls column and Mario Kelly. Okay. All right. Now, with that, are there any, I'm going to go ahead and take everybody off of mute again for just a second here. Are there any questions about anything so far?
I have a quick question.
Sure, go for it.
For the chart, can you alter the value for the chart? So, I mean, obviously it has automatic values in, like you showed the bar chart for the one missed call.
Right.
If you wanted to change the range of that, can you do it after it's already been made?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by range. Like if I want,
I don't know. The missed calls goes up to like say 10. I don't know what the number actually is. Can you change that, or so 5? So if you only wanted it to go up to 2, could you change that?
Right. On this, unfortunately, no. It kind of just bases it upon, like 5 is like the default essentially. If you have more than 5 calls, then of course that number will go up. But if it's less than 5, it typically just shows 5.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry. I wish I had a better answer for you.
Oh no, that's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Okay, there was another question. Question by Sophie asks, Sophie Angelina, how can I see the details of any abandoned calls and missed calls? That's a great question, Sophie. We actually have a couple different reports that you can look at. The main one would be this abandoned calls report. The abandoned calls report will show me how many calls we've had abandoned. But before we do that, let me show you this just so you guys kind of know. The question we get a lot here is what's the difference between an abandoned call and a missed call? That's typically a question that we get on a regular basis. Okay. So with that, I want to show you really quickly. We actually have an article that explains that difference, right? So here's one called Abandoned Calls versus Missed Calls. So really, at the end of the day, an abandoned call is a call that does not end with a talking event or a voicemail event. Okay, so if it doesn't end with you talking and it doesn't end with a voicemail, it will, maybe it's a hold event or a queue event, ringing event, something like that. If that's the case, then that's going to be represented as an abandoned call. Okay, so abandoned calls are any call that do not end in a talking or a voicemail event. Okay. Missed calls are pretty simple. Missed calls are calls that ring to my extension and I don't answer it, right? So if it comes to my extension, I don't answer it, that's going to count as a missed call for me. Now, typically speaking, abandoned calls are on a group level, whereas missed calls are on an agent level, meaning it's going to count as a missed call for me as the agent, right? Abandoned calls, like I said, are more on a group level. It's looking at how many calls have been abandoned for the group. So this report here, the abandoned calls report, abandoned calls report is probably going to be the best way to see your calls that have been abandoned, and it'll give you the details. Now, if you want to know if a call has been missed, essentially, again, that's going to be more on the agent level. So again, I would use something more like the agent call summary, or even something like the agent inbound calls. Agent inbound calls will actually show you if a call was answered or not as well. Sophie, does that answer your question for you? Okay, perfect. Okay, there's another question by Gina. Would it be a missed call if calls are set up to bounce from one phone to another? That's a great question. Yes, it would be a missed call for the user, right? So let me come back to that agent call summary really quickly here. And let me kind of show you what might happen, right? Let's say, for example, depending on how your call ringing pattern is set up. So if a call, for example, rings to Aaron Adams and he misses that call, in fact, you know what? I'm just going to run this report again just to make it a little bit easier to see. If a call is set up to ring to, if say, for example, Alexandra Burns misses that call, so then it rings to Brandon Carpenter, he misses it, then it rings to David Green, he misses it, and then it rings to Erica Owens, and she finally answers it. What you'll see here is you will see missed calls for all 3 of those users, and then 1 answered call for Erica Owens. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. It depends on how your call ringing pattern is set up. If it rings to an agent and they don't answer it, then yes, it will count as a missed call for them. Okay, Gina, does that answer your question for you? Hopefully. Okay, you're welcome. All right, there was another question. James' question is, why does the abandoned report show a column that says answered and some calls are listed as true and some are listed as false? If it's true, does this mean that the call was still abandoned? That's a great question, James. Sorry, I don't know if you go by Jim. I apologize. James, that's a great question. The answer to that question is abandoned calls can be calls that at one point were answered. And let me give you a scenario here. Let's say, for example, you call into me and I answer that call. And I say, hey, this is Blake with Xima Software. Can you hold for just a minute, please? And you say, sure. So I put you on hold and you wait 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You get sick of waiting, so you hang up. That call did not end in talking or a voicemail. So therefore, it will be an abandoned call, even though I answered that call. Okay. So abandoned calls can be calls that at one point were answered. It just means that call, again, did not end in that talking or that voicemail event. And in those situations, this report here, the abandoned calls report, will actually show you who that final agent was. So it will show you essentially who the last person that they spoke to when that call, assuming it was answered, when that call was abandoned. Okay, so it's a great question. It will show true if it was answered, false if it wasn't. Essentially, that basically just means that at one point someone did answer that call. It just ended again as an abandoned call. Yeah, you're welcome. That's a fantastic question. These have all been great questions, guys. Thank you. Sometimes people just don't ask questions, and I love this. Okay, another question: what happens with those abandoned missed calls if an agent answered in a group? Essentially, that's going to count as an answered call for the agent, but it's going to count as an abandoned call for the group. Okay, so again, there's going to kind of be two sides of that. That call was an inbound call that was answered by an agent, so it will count as answered. But again, for the group, it is going to, because it's on group level, it's going to count as an abandoned call for the group. Okay, now you can create a report that shows you calls that were abandoned when a specific agent was involved. Okay, that's a great question. So yeah, Sophie's question says there's no possibility for agents to have abandoned calls. There is, but you have to specify that. So there's not a report that's going to show individual agent abandoned calls, but you can create a column on a report with the custom reports module that will show you where calls ended as an abandoned call for that agent, essentially when that agent was involved with that call. Okay, and I can kind of show you how to do that today. Okay, fantastic. Any other questions? This is great. And I haven't had to say really no yet, except for maybe the first one, but for the most part, I think we're good. Okay, cool, guys. Well, let's keep going on here. Let's actually get to the portion of custom reports. Now, one last thing I will mention really quickly here. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this. You can schedule these reports to run. Okay, automatically. So if you want to schedule a report, you're more than welcome to. Again, I have an article that shows you how to do that, step-by-step instructions here on the guide site. So schedule report, there it is, step-by-step. Okay, so we'll go into that, or I'm not going to go into that too much today. Let's go ahead and jump back over here to Chronicle, and let's start talking about those custom reports. Now, with custom reports, again, as I mentioned, there's kind of three things you can do. You can create a report, you can edit a report, and then, of course, create the report skin. That's kind of the cherry on top, so we won't spend too much time there today. But if I want to create a report, all I have to do here is come to Create Report. Now, what's going to happen here is it's going to give me a list of options, basically for styles of reports that I can create. Okay, so this is an option here for me where I can go through now and select the style of report I want to create. But the hard thing about this is I'm not exactly sure what kind of information these reports are going to give me, right? I see things like agent, call, group, reason code, system. Like there's a lot of different options. But what kind of information is this going to give me? Well, let's for 2 seconds come back to the Run Reports section here, because every one of these reports, I'll come back here for 2 seconds, every one of these reports fit into one of 3 categories. Okay, so I want to quickly go through those categories to make this a little bit easier for you, or at least for nothing else, to give you some information based upon what kind of information is this report going to give me. Now, we have 3 categories. Let's talk about the first category. The first category is actually the most common. It's the most frequently used. It's what we refer to as a summary report. Summary reports here in standard reports are really simple to find, and that's because they all say the word summary right in the title. Okay, so if it says summary, it's going to give you totals of information, so summary of information. Okay, that's kind of the idea behind a summary report. But if I'm creating a report, if I come back here to create report, you'll notice that there's not an option that says summary. So how do I know if this report or if these reports are going to be a summary report? Well, the best way to know is to look at this column right here. This column is what we refer to as our rows column, R-O-W-S, rows column. Okay, and this will tell me what this is going to report on. Now, again, if I come back here to standard reports, that makes it really easy because it says summary right in the title. But here, I'm going to give you a list of things that you're going to look for in this column that will help you to know if this is going to be a summary report. Now, this might get a little overwhelming for just a second, but bear with me. I'm going to make it really easy in just a minute. Okay, so if you're not taking notes, this is a great time to take notes. I'm going to tell you a handful of the things, not an overall total of things, but a handful of the things that you're going to see here in this column if this is going to be a summary report. Okay, the first thing that you might see if it's a summary report is you might see an agent name. If you ever see an agent name in this column, it will be a summary report. Okay, if you ever see a group name, it will be a summary report. If you ever see a caller ID, the caller ID is the name of the person, a name of the caller, clearly, hence the name caller ID. This will be the name of the person. Okay, so in other words, if you ever see a name of any sort, it's going to be a summary report. If you ever see a call direction, inbound, outbound, internal, okay, those are going to be summary reports. If you have purchased the agent dashboards module, and if you've set up your account codes, if you ever see account codes here in this column, it is a summary report. One last one I'll give you. If you ever see a phone number, it will be a summary report. Okay, so just as kind of a quick recap here, just the ones I've given you, names such as agent or group or caller ID. So anytime you see a name, it's going to be a summary report. If you ever see a call direction, it's a summary report. If you ever see an account code, or a phone number. Those are all going to be summary reports. Okay, so again, summary reports give me grand totals. So totals or summaries of information is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Okay, now in this agent call summary, let's take a look for just a second here. We see Aaron Lewis, great. He had 114 inbound calls. Well, that's fantastic, but what if I want to see all 114 of those inbound calls? Now, I could go to cradle to grave to see those, but we do have reports that will show me call information for those inbound calls. I would use, in fact, a report called the Agent Inbound Calls Report. And what I would see here is I would see Aaron Lewis's name, and it would show me, if it ever catches up to me there, Aaron Lewis's name with how many inbound calls he had. There we go. So Aaron Lewis right here would be his name, and then 114 calls. And then what this report gives me is every single line is going to be a call. It's going to represent one phone call. So every line is a phone call, and then it gives me these details for those calls. Okay, this is what we refer to as a detailed report. Detailed reports are just that. They're more detailed. So I'm going to get call details on an inbound or on a detailed report. Again, going back to that abandoned calls report, this is, again, another detailed report because, again, it gives me call details. Now, the other benefit to this, and I won't go through this today, but I won't show you how to do this today. The other benefit to this is I can actually copy this number right here. This number is what we refer to as a call ID, not caller ID, but a call ID. A call ID is a number that ties to this call in our database. Okay, so what I can do with that is if I wanted to know more about this call here, I can actually copy this number, take it to cradle to grave for the same time frame, and paste that in our quick search tool, and it will take me to that call to show me the details of those calls. Okay, so detailed reports are just that. They're more detailed. Okay, so with those detailed reports, there's actually only 3 options here in my list. We're going to have call ID, which is by far the most popular. Okay. And then from there, we also have event ID. And I want you to kind of notice a theme here. With this one, it's going to say call ID. This one says event ID. And this one here is the last one, which is feature ID. If you ever see the word ID in that report, it means it's a detailed report. Okay. There's only 3 options: call, event, and feature. Oh, looks like there's a question. Okay. Can I have more than one report in the same PDF. I don't want to receive every day 20 reports. I don't blame you, Sophie. You know, unfortunately, you can't. Not that I know of, not that I've tried. Typically speaking, I mean, if you were to, you could essentially combine reports, right? Like, so if there was a report that had, you know, if you wanted to take information from one report and put it into another report, like you can build a report that has kind of two reports fused together type of situation. But unfortunately, it looks like you're going to have to get 20 reports. I'm really sorry to tell you that. Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I wish I had. There's another time I had to say no. I apologize. Okay. Well, and the other thing you could do is if you are receiving these reports like through a schedule, you can have it emailed to you as like a link, so it all ends up in the same email, and you can just click on the link and it opens it up for you. So you can do that. But otherwise, if you email it as an attachment, you'll have 20 different. Like, assuming you have 20 reports, it's going to have 20 different attachments on that report. So you can have it sent as a link, which is a little bit better, but not by much. So. Apologize. Any other questions on this so far? Okay. Oh, you know what? And I've got everybody on mute still. I apologize. Let me do that one more time just to be sure. Okay, there we go. Now you're all off of mute on my side. Again, just one more time. Any questions? Okay. Cool. So those are our detailed reports. Again, like I said, those three. We're going to create one of those today. We're going to create a summary report as well as a detailed report today. The last kind of report, the last style of report, there's not a lot of them, but it is one that we do have requests, or we do have people look for a lot. We have what we refer to as time interval reports. Now, at the root, time interval reports are actually summary reports. Okay, but you'll notice this report right here is actually a really popular report, the inbound call performance report. This allows me to see, based upon whatever my time interval of choice is, so hour of day, minutes of hour, months of year, days of week, whatever your preference is, I can run this report, and let's say, for example, this really was hour of day. Like I said, this is just fill information, so don't pay attention to it necessarily. But right here where it says hour of day, this would say midnight to 1 a.m. It would show me during that time frame how many calls were presented, answered, abandoned, and so forth. 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., presented, answered, abandoned, and so forth. So this report is actually really popular because it allows me to see my traffic. When am I busiest? When am I slowest? That kind of information. When should I schedule more people? Or when should I hire more people, right? Something like that. Maybe I've scheduled everybody, but we're still behind. So that's a good indicator that you might need to hire a couple more people, right? So these reports, these time interval reports, at their root, at their base, are summary reports. It's giving me summaries of information. However, when I run these reports, I'm not running it to show me a specific group or agent. I mean, there are different kinds of reports that I can do with, but for the most part, this is going to show me a time interval. Okay, so if I wanted to create a time interval report, there's only one option. That's time. Okay, so that is how I would create a time interval report. So that's one option, time interval. My second option is a detailed report. There's three options there: call, event, and feature. Everything else is going to be a summary. Okay, so it makes it a little bit easier if you're looking for a summary report. If it's not one of those four items, call, event, feature, or time, then it's going to be a summary report. Okay, questions there? Okay, cool. All right, guys, well, let's go ahead now and do the fun stuff. Let's go ahead and create a report. Now, I want to start off by creating a summary report today. We're going to create an agent summary report, okay? That's a great question, Jocelyn. Well, not really. No, unfortunately, not really. You can't have one that's, so everybody probably didn't see Jocelyn's questions. Her question is, can you have a report that has all three? Not really. Not to that level of detail. So you're going to have to create three separate styles of reports, essentially to feature all of them. So that's a great question. It is something that I can submit to our product team, but at the time, the answer to that is no. Yeah, sorry. It makes it kind of difficult because of the information that you're requesting, right? So if I want to report, there are certain things where I can do where I can run a report for agent and group on the same report. Right. In fact, we have a couple of those as part of our standard reports. We have what we call our agent summary by group and group summary by agent. So here's one called group summary by agent. So this shows me here's my agent So it shows me the agents, so I would select the agents that I would want to see, and then it shows me the groups that they're a part of. So if you have agents that are part of multiple groups, this is a great report because it allows me to see their agent information per group. Okay, and then of course there's the other side of that, which is agent summary by group, which is here's the group, and then it shows me the agents that are part of that group. Okay. Sorry, so there's another question here. Where can I see the difference between a running report I receive by email versus another one that I don't run? I'm not sure I understand your question, Sophie. Difference between a running report I receive by email versus another one that I don't run. Let's see here. Yeah, so you can see all the available reports in this list. And maybe we can chat afterwards, Sophie. I apologize. Yeah, sorry. There was another question here. What's the name of the report that shows us the high traffic and low traffic times? That one is going to be under our time interval reports. Oops, let me do this. And that's going to be called the inbound call performance. So like in this list here, Sophie, where are those I run versus the ones I don't run in my list here? Yeah, so the best thing to do here is if you find if you want to know the reports that you run, there's a couple things that you can do. So for example, the easiest thing to do, I haven't run any, well, this is my demo here and it doesn't tell me that I've run reports, but if I run reports, you can actually sort them by times run. So if I run reports more frequently, then I can see all of those reports at the top of the list if I sort by times run. The other thing you can do is as you find reports that you run more often, you can actually star them. Okay, if I star them, essentially what that does is it prioritizes the report. And I can either log out, log back in, or hit refresh. And the reports that I've run, or that I've starred, if I hit refresh, then those reports that I've starred will move to the top of my list to make it easier for me to find those reports. So the reports that you've run, oh, there's one right there. It does say that I've run reports. So agent call summary. So I could, like I said, do this, right? I sort that by times run. And it would show the reports that I run most often up to the top. Yeah, that's probably my best recommendation. Sorry, I misunderstood and I apologize. But great, that's a great question. Okay. Any other questions before we move on here? We want to get to the good stuff here. Okay, you're welcome. All right, cool. Well, let's come here to create reports again. I'm going to do an agent summary report. All I have to do is select the kind of report that I want to create and then hit next. Now here, this is where it both gets very simple and somewhat complicated at the same time. To create a report, all I have to do is hit add. And what happens is I'm going to get a window that shows me all of the different options, all of the different things that are available for me to use when creating my report. Now, these will be different based upon the style of report that it is that I'm creating. Okay, so I can go through this list here and select from here the items that I would want to see on this report. Now, this is again why I say it's very important, or my best recommendation would be to come in with an idea already of what it is that you want to see. Okay, because if you come in here with that idea, it's going to make this much easier. So for example, let's take call count. Now I'll select call count here, and we'll see a couple things pop up here over to the side. We'll come back to these in just a minute. But for right now, if I wanted to just add call count to my list, I would just have to select it and then hit OK, and boom, there it is on my report. Okay, really simple. I can do that with anything here. So you can take all of these at face value if I want. Calls transferred by the agent. Okay, let's hit add again. Calls transferred to the agent. Okay, so we can do it really simple just like that, but my bet is that that's too broad, okay? And let me show you what I mean. Let's come back to call count. Instead of hitting add, I'm gonna hit edit because I've already got call count there. So I wanna edit what call count means. So if I wanna know what a specific value means, I'm gonna come here where it says description, and it's gonna show me that this shows the total number of calls, inbound, outbound, and internal associated with the given agent. Well, that is really broad, right? It's nice if I want to see just a grand total of how many calls the users have been involved with. That's great. But again, like I said, for me, that's too broad. So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. What I want to do now is I want this to reflect my data. What is it that I want to see with call count? Because as I make that decision, what I can now do is I can come in here and tweak the definition of what that means. No longer is it going to have to be just a broad count of all those calls. I can make this reflect what I want to see. So I'm going to change the name to this. I don't want to call it call count. I want to call it inbound, greater than 3. Bear with me here. I will explain what this means. But I'm going to explain what it means by now coming down here and using my filters. Okay. Now you're going to have essentially 4 levels of filters. You're going to have required criteria. Those are the things that you have to have. Now you don't have to change the name to it, but you at least have to have a name there. Okay, so I could leave it called call count if I want to. But I changed that name. Now I can come down to general criteria. I'm going to go ahead and move that for just a second here. General criteria, I'm actually not going to change anything here with this right now. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Okay. For this, I want to use event level. Now I called this report inbound greater than 3. What I want to see in this value is I want to see how many inbound calls the user had that had a talking event that was greater than 3 minutes long. So to do that, I first need to tell this, what event do I want this to look at? What kind of call? What should that call involve in order for it to count? So I'm going to come here where it says event level, or event type, excuse me. And I said a talking event. So there we go. Hit talking. Great. It now knows that it's looking for calls with a talking event, inbound calls with a talking event. But that's not specific enough. Now I want to come down here to where it says call level. Call level gives me more advanced opportunities. In other words, it's more advanced filters. So I said inbound calls with a talking event greater than 3. So I've already selected my talking event. Now I need to tell it inbound calls. Here's my call direction. Inbound. Great. Last thing, that talking event has to be greater than 3 minutes long. So I'm going to come down here to event duration. Event is already looking at the talking event, so I just need to tell it what that event duration should be, or what the threshold is. So I'm going to come down here and say greater than or equal to 3. There we go. So now inbound greater than 3 means an inbound call with a talking event that's greater than 3 minutes long, and that is my new definition for what that means. So you can be as specific as you want with this. Let's do another one. I'm going to hit add again. Let's do answered calls. Okay? Answered calls is great. Really straightforward. If I want to know what that means, again, just click on it. Shows the number of inbound calls that include at least one talking event with the given agent, meaning that the agent answered the call. Well, that's good, but guess what? My company has a service level agreement. That means that I'm only going to count it as an answered call, or let me rephrase that. I want to know how many calls they had where they hit that threshold, or where they got it within, or they answered it within that service level agreement. So to me, that service level agreement is answered within less than 10 seconds. So we've got an option down here called speed of answer, less than 10 seconds. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to change the name to this one again. I just want to call it answered less than 10. There we go. Great. Hit OK. It's in a weird spot. I don't want it to be there at the bottom, so I'm going to move it up. There we go. Let's hit add again. I'm going to do that exact same option, only this time, instead of being answered in less than 10, I'm going to have it be answered in greater than 10. In fact, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to call this missed because I'm mean. And I'm going to say a missed call is any call, even if it was answered in greater than 10 seconds. Okay, now I wouldn't do that necessarily. You can if you want to, but there we go. That's what I did. Okay, so there you have it. Right, so you can be as specific with this as you want. You can even go so far as to create your own formulas. Maybe on this report, you know what? I want to see not just, how many calls they answered within that service level agreement, what percentage of calls are they answering within that service level agreement? Okay, so I'm going to come down here and say add formula, and I'm going to choose my values that I want to use represent this formula. But before I do that, I need to name this. We're going to call this Blake's SLA, service level agreement. Hit add. And now I get to choose the values that I want to use to create my formula. So we're going to start with a simple one, answer calls. And again, I'm going to change this to reflect what my service level agreement is. Speed of answer, less than 10 seconds. Okay. In fact, we're going to change this to say less than or equal to. That's a little bit better. Okay. All right. Great. So there's value number 1. Now I need to add the second value that essentially I'm going to use as the comparison. So we'll hit add again. This time we're going to just do presented calls. So how many calls were answered? What's the percentage of calls answered based upon calls presented? And that one I'm not going to change anything with. I'm just going to leave that as is and hit OK. Great. So I've got two values here that I'm going to use to create my formula. This is now where I can come down and create my formula. The $ that you see here represents the beginning of a new formula. So here's formula or value 1, which is answer calls. Here's formula 2 or value 2. I keep saying that. Here's my presented calls. So I want to compare these two. So I'm going to go ahead and put just a quick division symbol there. I'm going to choose how I want this presented. Again, I want to see a % of calls answered within that service level agreement. I can even test that formula to make sure that it works. Formula is valid. Okay, great. Hit OK. And now that value that I've just created, or that formula that I've just created, is now a part of my options that I can use from this point on. So I can use this one on other reports in the future. But I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And great. That's now on my report. There it is. Okay. One last thing. Let's hit add again. Coming back to kind of those general criteria items. Thanks, Jocelyn. Thank you. All right, from there, I'm going to go ahead and say, let's do this. Let's do an event count. I want to count how many times. I want to count of how many times there was a specific event that took place on my calls. Let's come here to event type. And we'll go ahead and open this up. And you know what? I want to see how many hold events they've had on their calls. Go ahead and hit OK. Great. And in fact, I'm going to do this column thresholds option. What does that mean? Well, what this is going to show me is I'm going to keep track of how many calls they've had with a hold event. But not only that, I have a threshold. Once they hit 8 calls with a hold event, this is going to turn yellow. Okay. And then once they hit 12 calls with a hold event, we're going to turn that red. That basically just sends kind of like a threshold or an urgency type situation, right? Maybe part of that service level agreement is they have to answer calls within less than 10 seconds. And on top of that, they can't have more than 10 or 8 calls, or let's go just come here where we have it already. They can't have more than 12 calls with a hold event. Okay, so I'm going to have that be text color or background color. Text means it just changes the numbers. Background color actually changes the entire column. Okay, there we go, just like that. In fact, I should have named that hold count. So I'll hit edit there, and we're going to come back and do this hold count. Okay, good. Great, there we have it. Okay, one last one. I know I'm spending a lot of time here, but I'm going to show you one last item because this was kind of in correlation with what we were talking about a little earlier. Abandoned calls, right? If I want to see if users had abandoned calls, I'm going to go ahead and hit add here again, and I'm going to use this call count option. Of course, we have abandoned calls here, right? So you can use this abandoned calls option here. But I'm going to do call count, and I'm going to show you this. You know what? I am going to stay in abandoned calls, and I'm going to do this. Let's scroll down here and see this. Final event. I want to know when that user had an abandoned call where that final event. Remember, keep in mind, final events or abandoned calls are calls that don't end with talking or a voicemail. So I'm going to keep track of calls where they had people on hold or park. Okay, or even it was ringing to them. It rang to them and they hung up before they could answer, or hung up before they could go to voicemail. So we can do something like that, right? So it's really easy to add those abandoned calls onto a report, and that way it will show you how many times that agent was the final agent when that call ended as an abandoned call. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of different values there. Obviously, we could spend all day doing this with every kind of report. Are there any questions about that, about how to do that? In fact, let me go ahead and take everybody off of mute again for just a minute here. Any questions about any of this here?
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
So when you change the value of what something is, does it automatically reset when you do a new report?
Great question. Absolutely. Yeah. It's only going to change for that specific report that you're creating.
Okay.
Yeah. Great question. Unless it's a formula that you've created, right? So I created that formula. Obviously that's a formula I've created, so you can use that on other reports in the future. But yeah, if I, for example, change inbound greater than 3 from call count, then yeah, it will reset to call count when I go create another report. So great question.
Okay.
Hmm? Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put everybody back on mute. There we go. Okay, great. Now, once I've found the values that I want to have on my report, I've created it. It looks beautiful. Best report I've ever created. We're going to go ahead and hit next. And from here, it's going to say, and I didn't mention this earlier, and I apologize. Most of our reports, not all of them, but most of our reports are going to have what we refer to as the overall summary. Okay, this is the overall summary up here. And essentially, it's just giving you the grand totals for the columns. Okay, so if I want to, it's going to give me the option to create that for this report. That's what this define report summary section is. So I can go through and say, okay, I want to see, yeah, total inbound calls greater than 3, total answered, average Blake's SLA, total calls transferred by agent, to agent, total hold count, and total abandoned calls, right? So really pretty simple. If you want to add that, you can. You don't have to. I'm going to create another report in just a minute here where I don't add it. That's just me personally. But from there, I hit next. It's now going to say, okay, well, what do you want to call this? I'm going to call this Blake's. Let's just call this Blake's Custom. Okay. So once I've done that, I've got my report named. It will give me the option to choose the orientation of the report. I only have 2 options, portrait or landscape. But here, I also have this option to create my default parameter values. Remember, parameters are these questions. The default parameter value means that I can answer those questions right here, right now, if I want to. Or if I'm not ready to run the report, I can just hit finish and be done, and then set those up when I run the report. But for right now, maybe I am going to run this report right now. So I come here where it says report time frame, click to define. Okay, what report time frame do I want to see? Well, I want to see last week. Okay. From there, which agents, as this is an agent report that I've just created, I'm going to go ahead and select marketing team 1. And then it also gives me the option. This is only an option if I have custom reports. I can also choose how this report is sorted. So I can do this by ascending by agent. That's default, so A to Z. Or I can have it be Z to A if I prefer. Maybe I want it to be ascending by answered calls less than 10 seconds. So I want to see who my champions are for answering calls in less than 10 seconds. Right? So you can do that if you want. I can add my charts if I want to, but from there I would just come down here and hit finish after I've answered those questions. And what will happen now is that report that I've just created will now end up in my list of standard reports. And on top of that, that report is ready to go. I don't actually have to do anything else other than just hit run report. Okay. Now this report might be awful. It might not give me any information. I don't know, but we're going to see here. Okay. It gives us a little bit, right? Unfortunately, well, actually, fortunately, unfortunately, I have, a hold count here where nobody has had more than 8 calls on hold. So that's good, but disappointing for lack of example here. Okay. But anyway, so there you go. That's how you run those reports. That's how you create those reports really easy. Let's see here. Sophie's question is, how can I see a daily or weekly report? So that depends. The way that you would see a daily report essentially is just you would choose just a day rather than do the entire week, right? So if I just wanted to see the 3rd, or if I wanted to see the 7th, whatever that might be. So you just have to select the day that you want to see. For this kind of report, again, it's going to be well, actually, for all reports, you have to kind of be specific with your time frames. So if I wanted to see just Mondays and just Wednesdays on a report, right, I can select the entire week, but I want it to show just Monday and Wednesday. I could come here to advanced and change where it says days of week, and I could just select Monday and Wednesday. Okay, so that's one way you can do that. If you wanted to schedule the report to do it, you can do it that way as well. You can schedule it to where it shows the specific days. Yeah. So hopefully that helps answer your question for you. Okay. Question from Jocelyn. When setting up a scheduled report, how do I make sure that it's capturing the correct dates? Okay. So let's do this really quickly. Let's say I want to schedule this report. I would come here to schedule report. The first thing it's going to ask you is to name it. We're just going to call this test, and then choose how you want that sent. I can have it emailed, saved to a server directory, or I can have it printed. I would just select email here. That's just me. If I want this to go to just me, I can put my email here. If I want this to go to multiple people, and it kind of reminds you this here, separate each email address with a comma. So if I wanted to do another one, I would just hit comma and then type in the email for the other individual that I would want that to go to. Okay. Now from there, I hit next, and it's going to ask me to select when I want this to run for the first time. Okay. So maybe I want this as a weekly report. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and select when I want this to run for the first time. The reason I bring up a weekly report is because it will help to determine when you want this report to run for the first time based upon how frequently I want it to run. right? So if I want this to run as a weekly report, depending on when I want it to deliver, maybe I want it to run at the end of day on Friday, right? So I'm going to come here where it says the 14th, which is this coming Friday, and I want that to run at the very end of the day. I'm talking 11:59 p.m. Right, so I would just change my time frame here to say 11:59. Great. So I'm going to have it run on the 14th, 11:59. From there, I hit OK, and I can choose that weekly. I can also do hourly, daily, specific days of the week, weekly or monthly. Okay, for now, we're just going to go ahead and leave it on weekly. And then I can say every week or every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. That's all, again, of course, all up to you. Now, from there, I'll hit next. And the next thing it's going to ask me to do is it's going to say, hey, what time frame do you want shown on this report? Right? So I chose a weekly. I chose, weekly. So I'm going to come up here where it says report time frame. And here's what I would do. If I've selected this as a weekly report to run on Friday night at 11:59 p.m., that means most likely I want that to cover this week. Okay, so I'm going to select the 10th through the 14th. Now, what happens after that report runs on Friday night is this. On Friday night at 11:59:59, it's going to run, it's going to send a report to my email that shows the 10th through the 14th. What happens from there is that report schedule then moves to the 21st. On the 21st at 11:59:59, I'm going to get a report covering the 17th through the 21st. It then moves to the 28th, covering the 24th through the 28th. Then moves to the, 4th, covering the 31st through the 4th. So it just continues to repeat that same pattern, basically until I tell it to stop. It's not actually necessarily looking at the dates. It's looking at the pattern, right? So if I say Monday through Friday, it's going to report Monday through Friday, okay? You're welcome. That's a great question, Jocelyn. Any other questions about scheduling reports, guys? Of course, from there, I would hit OK, and then I would, as an agent report, I would select my agents and then hit finish, and that report would then be scheduled to run. Okay. You guys have had some really good questions today, so thank you. It puts us behind time a little bit. I hope you guys are okay with that. We still have a little bit to go through, and we just hit our hour mark, so I do apologize, but I'm fine with it if you guys are. So. Okay. Any other questions before I move on? I apologize. I keep doing that. I'll take y'all off of mute. Okay. Cool. All right. Now, from here, there is one thing. I'm going to create another report in just a second, but there's one other thing I want to talk about really quickly, and that is this. Sometimes what happens is you may go to run or create a report, and it may be, you kind of think to yourself, I really don't want to create a full report. Keep in mind, another option that you have is to edit an existing report, right? So if I find a report, let's take, for example, that agent call summary, right? I keep going back to that one I know, but it's a popular report. So with this being the case, if this is a report that I really like, it's just missing a couple things, or maybe, the definitions don't quite match what it is I want to see, change it. Right? You can get in here and you can edit this report. If I want to edit this report, all I have to do is right click on it and hit edit report. From there, it's going to give me an option. I can either edit the copy or edit the original. As cool as I think I am, I never recommend editing originals, right? You can, of course, if you want, but like I said, as cool as I think I am, I can't say that I'm never going to need that again. So I always say edit a copy. From there, once you edit a copy, what will happen is you're going to get a report that already has a foundation for you to work with. So I'm not having to start from the ground up. But now I can come in here and say, okay, answer calls, great. Guess what? Again, I want to make sure that this is fitting my service level agreement. So all I have to do is select answer calls, hit edit, and it's going to pop open with that same window. Now all I have to do is scroll down here, find speed of answer, and say less than 10. There we go. Easy. Now, of course, I would change the name to say answered less than 10. I'm going to hit add. Let's hit add. I want to add something. Blake's service level agreement formula. There we go. It's now added to my report. The point is you can come in here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this just because it's really similar to building the report. But the difference is I have a foundation to work with. I don't have to worry about building it from the ground up. I've already got stuff here for me to use. I just have to tweak it so that it represents my specific value, right? Inbound calls. Again, I hit edit. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name to that. Inbound greater than 3, right? So now I can come through here and set my filters here. So again, talking event. It's already looking at inbound calls, so I don't have to worry about that. Event duration greater than or equal to 3 minutes. There we go. Done. Okay. So again, editing a report is the easiest way to go about creating a report because, again, you have that foundation. You're going to find a report. I guarantee you're going to find a report that really closely matches what it is you're looking for. From there, all you have to do is just make your few little changes to that. Okay. From there, once I've done that, it's the same thing. And so after I've added my new items and created my new items, I hit next, and then it's going to say, hey, do you want to add that overall summary for those new items that you've added? I just added one, which is that service level agreement. There we go. It's now on there. I hit next, what I want to call it. I'll just leave it that for right now. But from there, I can go ahead and hit finish. And again, that report that I've just edited is now again in my list of standard reports, and I run that and schedule that just like I would any other report. Okay, so really simple to do. That is what I recommend. But of course, that is entirely up to you. I don't lose any sleep if you decide to create a report from the ground up. Okay, any questions on editing a report? Okay, cool. Now, one last thing, guys. I mentioned you can, of course, change those report skins just really quickly here. You can change the way that that report looks. Just by coming in here, clicking on this little ellipsis tool here. This is where you can come in and add your logo if you want to. So right here where it says logo image, I can come in here, open this up, find wherever it is that I've got my logo saved, and then once I find that, oops, there it is right there. I can open that up and it will be then placed on my report. Okay, that's usually why people use this. Of course, you can absolutely change all of the colors to this if you wanted to. You don't have to keep it at face value. Like I said, you can come in here and make the changes that you want to and leave the things that you don't care to change. Okay, now it's really small, but I can use the logo X, logo Y, and logo scale to make those changes to that specific portion. Okay. Again, like I said, I want to spend more time on things that are going to be more important for you today. And so I'm not going to spend too much time there unless anybody has questions about it. So you can let me know, I guess. Okay, let's create one last report. No, I don't want to save that. Okay. Let's create one last report just because I want to show you something that you can do with these parameters here. So the last thing I want to create is I want to create a detailed report. Okay, so let's create a call detail report. All I'm going to do is select call here and then hit next. It's going to take me to a window that we have not seen before. We're going to skip this for now. I will return to it in just a second. For now, let's just come in here and hit next. We can now go ahead and do just like we did with that agent report. We can now build our report. But as I mentioned previously, keep in mind these values will be different based upon the kind of report that it is that you are creating. Okay. So here I can come in. Let's do something like, let's do call direction. Actually, no, I lied. Let's do caller ID. Caller ID is the name of the person that's calling. Let's do add again. Let's do not only caller ID, but let's also see what their phone number is, external party. Okay, let's also see something like call direction. Are they calling inbound? Is this a call going outbound? How is that working, right? So I would come through here and add the values to my report. Great. Oops, let's do that. Okay, nice and easy. Okay, very, very sophisticated report. It's probably one you'll all want to use. Just kidding, it's terrible. But I would just add my values here, hit next, and again, do the same things. It's going to ask me if I want to add that overall summary. For this one, I'm not concerned about it. Hit next again, and now I can change the name. We're going to call this Blake's Detailed. Okay, from there we hit finish. Great, now my report is done. Like I said, it's a great report. I want to run it now. So it's going to go now, open up, run reports. Great, so here we go. Report time frame, I want to see, let's do last week. Great, the 3rd through the 7th. Awesome. Here's my problem. Which users is this report looking at? Which groups is this report looking at? As it is right now, it's looking at everything. Every call, every group, every user. And that might be exactly what you want, and that's great. But if by chance there are specific users or specific groups I want this report to look at, there's no way for me to change that. There's no way for me to select which group or which users. So I have to create that option. I have to create a new parameter for agent or for group or whatever that is. So let me show you how to do that. Right here where it says Blake's Detailed, I'm going to right click on it and we're going to edit this report. So I don't have to recreate it. But when I edit it, it's actually going to take me back to that window that I skipped, although now it has writing in there. It didn't have that originally. It was just blank. This is where I get to create filters for this report. Let me show you. I'll hit Add Filter here. And I basically have two options. Let's say I wanted to run this report for agents, right, or my users. Here where it says agent, I can open this ellipsis tool up and I can select the specific users that I want this to feature. Maybe I want it to be marketing team 1. Great. Once I hit OK and save that report, here's the problem. When I run this report, it will only ever, so let me rephrase that, it will ever only look at those users. It won't look at anyone else. It doesn't give me the option to select anyone else. It's only going to look at marketing team 1 forever, unless I re-edit the report. So I don't want to do that. That's too much work for me. It's not hard. It's just more work that I want to do. So what I would do instead of using the ellipsis tool here is I would come over here where it says agent and just right click next to this. Excuse me for just a second. Sorry, I had a tickle in my throat. Okay, so what I would do now is I would come down here where it says create new parameter. That's what I want. I want to create a new parameter. So I'm going to select that option and then just leave this called agent and hit OK. Now I'll hit next and then next again. It's going to give us another window that we've not seen before. Right here, we're going to, again, come back to this one in just a second. Well, once I finish this report, now that I go to run it, what you're going to notice is down in my report runner window, or again, my parameters, I now have the option to select which agents. Okay, of course, that wasn't there before. So I can select which agents this is looking at. So now I can run that report for my desired time frame, my desired agents. I still have one problem, one minor problem, and that is, yes, it is looking at specific agents that I select, but it's not telling me which agents are involved with which calls. Sure, it's looking at the selected agents, but I have no idea still which users are involved with which calls. So one more time, I'm going to edit this report, and we're going to go back to that second window that I skipped. Okay, so we've already gone through this one. And by the way, you can do this. You can create a parameter for anything in this list. Okay, so keep that in mind. But I'm going to go back to that second window that I skipped, which is this one right here. Now, this is giving me the option to essentially create what we refer to as sub-reports. Sub-reports essentially makes it so there's mini reports within the report. Let me show you what I mean. Right now, there's no sub-report, meaning it's not going to tell me which agents were involved with which calls. But if I select this agent option, it will break this down now by agent. So I will be able to see which agents are involved with which calls. And so when I say a sub-report, that just basically means mini reports. So here's a mini report within the main report. Okay. So that gives me that option. So when I run the report now, it's not going to just allow me to select which users. It also now allows me to break it down by those users. So I can see which users were involved with which calls. Now, you may or may not ever use that. It is an advanced option. You, in fact, can do that with any report when I'm creating the reports. But for the most part, most often the places you're going to use that are here under a call detail report. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to take everybody off of mute again, kind of one last time here. Are there any questions about that or anything else that we've discussed today? Perfect. If nothing else, guys, if you do still have questions, feel free to check out our guide site, which does offer some information on doing these items here that we've talked about today. And secondly, if you can't see what you're looking for there, call into our support staff and we'll be able to help you there. Thank you, everyone.